The drone footage didn't lie. Brown sludge oozed into the lake, just beyond the no trespassing sign I'd installed myself. There stood Karen, the HOA president, beside a backhoe, hands on hips, like she was unveiling some modern art piece instead of a violation. Across the lake, I stood with binoculars in one hand and my phone in the other, already dialing my lawyer. That's how it all began. The HOA, knee-deep in their own sewage scandal, somehow twisting it into a lawsuit against me. It started with a smell, sharper than fishy lake air, more like sun-baked diapers drowned in air freshener. I noticed it on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, watching ducks make lazy trails across the water. Something was wrong. The lake had turned greasy, like motor oil after rain. I thought maybe it was runoff from the construction site up north. But by Thursday, the ducks were gone, and the lake had become a mat of green-gray algae, thick as mossy pancakes. I wasn't a scientist, but I knew better than to sit on my hands. I packed up my kayak, a cooler full of ice, and some mason jars, and spent that Saturday paddling around like a redneck EPA agent, scooping samples and stacking jars beside my Coors Light. The closer I got to the southeast cove behind the maintenance shed, the worse the smell. That's where I found it, a hose the size of a fire line, buried in cattails, spewing brown liquid into the lake, no filter, no signage. Just toxic runoff in plain sight. I took photos. Then video. Then I called the county. The environmental services rep promised to open a case, but her voice was the kind that told you your complaint was going straight into a drawer. I wasn't shocked. Around here, the HOA outweighs the mayor. And Karen, Queen Karen, ran it like her personal fiefdom. You either bowed or got banished. I chose neither. Monday, I walked into the HOA office with a manila folder under one arm and 3 jars of lake water under the other. Karen sat behind her desk in pearls and linen, looking like a woman about to sell you an annuity. She addressed me with a cool nod, already knowing why I was there. I slid a photo across her desk, a close-up of the hose. No words, just proof. She studied it with the patience of someone examining a scratch on her Mercedes. When I placed the jar in front of her, she didn't so much as flinch. Instead, she slid the photo back like it was blackjack and she'd busted. And then came the twist, a violation notice already printed, accusing me of polluting the lake from my own property. A $1,200 fine, due in 30 days. I laughed. Not out of humor, but because the absurdity of being fined for their mess was too much. Her response was razor sharp, "It's not your lake. It's the HOA's lake." That was the moment I knew the meeting was a setup. The neighbors fell in line fast. By Friday, no one waved anymore. Packages came dented. The newsletter included a thinly veiled hit piece about irresponsible lakefront owners. Someone even dumped dog crap in my mailbox. Twice. Karen was orchestrating a smear campaign with small-town precision. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that 30 years ago, my grandfather drilled the well that supplied water to every house in the neighborhood. Back then, the area was just a cabin on a dry patch of land and a retired hydrologist with a dream. That hydrologist was my grandfather. When the developers arrived in the 2000s, they signed a private use agreement with him, access to the well in exchange for monthly maintenance payments and a clause that said ownership stayed with him, and by inheritance, me. The next week, I tore through his old filing cabinets, steel drawers packed like Cold War archives. There it was, the original water rights agreement. Notarized. County maps. Line diagrams. The works. I cross-referenced them with public infrastructure records. Every tap in the subdivision, pool, parks, clubhouse, drew from my well. I'd become more than just a resident. I was their supplier. Their silent landlord. While Karen tried to label me a polluter, she'd been flushing her office toilet with my water. And I had plans. They'd start at the next HOA meeting, but first, I had some valves to close. The contract was ancient, fax numbers instead of emails. The kind of document typed on yellowing paper that still smelled like must and ink. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my shed, surrounded by blueprints and legalese, mildew in the air, my grandfather's name in looping script on every page. Water Access and Supply License Agreement, dated April 1, 1989, notarized by someone named Edna. Ironclad. Untouched. And now, finally, in the hands of someone who knew exactly how to use it. The old contract bore a floral stamp and a date so faded it looked like a relic from another era. But its message was crystal clear: the well, and every drop it produced, was private property. Ours. Back then, a developer named Hank Durbin had signed an agreement that allowed shared access, provided the HOA paid a small monthly fee and acknowledged the well remained under family ownership. The kicker. The contract had no expiration date, no renewal clause, and absolutely no easement rights beyond passive use. My great-uncle, may he rest in paranoid peace, had buried the ownership clause so deep in the legalese it was practically encrypted. The man might have been a recluse, but he knew how to write a contract that could outlive a nuclear winter. I sat in the shed, knees dusty, laughing like a lunatic. Karen and her clipboard brigade were filing fantasy violations while hydrating their kingdom with my inherited well. That laugh, though, it didn't last. My mind snapped back to the pipe, the sludge, the algae blooms spreading like a disease across the lake. If they were that reckless with what went out, what the hell were they sending in? I called in a favor. Doug, a buddy from my brief career in water consulting, still owed me for a messy incident involving an excavator and a fifth of Jack Daniels. He didn't ask many questions. Said he could be there the next day, gear in tow. We'd test the well, my tap, and 2 random hydrants from HOA lines. He showed up in flannel, smelling like venison jerky, and got to work. The results were worse than I feared. My line. Clean. But the HOA hydrants were a chemical soup, off the charts with fecal coliforms, phosphates, and compounds neither of us could pronounce without a degree or a cough. They hadn't just contaminated the lake. They'd backfed sewage into the drinking supply. That changed everything. Environmental violations. Health code breaches. Direct contract violation. I had every legal right to terminate their access, and I didn't wait. No announcements. No grandstanding. Just one turn of a rusted valve behind my garage. I sealed the hatch with a padlock and chain. Then I went inside, made popcorn, and watched it all collapse like slow-motion fireworks. It started with panicked calls. Then came a mass email, temporary maintenance disruption. By morning, water pressure had flatlined. Karen's prized fountain at the HOA clubhouse wheezed to a halt. Sprinklers dried up. Toilets flushed like dying whales. Then came the trucks, bottled water deliveries backed up at the entrance, paid for by an emergency fund already drained from last year's landscaping disaster. Residents started asking questions. Why wasn't there a backup? Why hadn't they been told? Why were they paying $900 a month for the privilege of bathing with Dasani? Karen was sweating lavender and panic. She called a special board meeting behind closed doors, HOA members only, taped across the windows like they were guarding nuclear codes. I wasn't invited. Didn't matter. Halfway through, Paul, a neighbor with a spine, texted me a photo of the agenda. Item 3, discussion of legal action against well operator. I nearly dropped my beer. Legal action. Against me. For turning off my own water. The next morning, a courier knocked. A certified letter in HOA letterhead with more bark than bite. They accused me of sabotage, endangerment, and breach of trust. Demanded I restore flow, submit to third-party inspections, and agree to a brand new operating agreement written entirely by their lawyers. No compensation. No negotiation. I read it twice. Laughed harder the second time. These people had no clue. You can't sue someone for withholding what's theirs, especially after you violated the terms and dumped literal sewage into the supply. So I called Luann. Old family friend. Legal pit bull with a specialty in land disputes. I'm going to fax you something, I said. Then bury them. She lived for this. Within 48 hours, Karen received a cease and desist stapled to a formal complaint for environmental misconduct. It came with a notarized termination of access, per Section 8.4, and an invoice for contamination testing, damages, and legal fees, $1,147,805.62, due in 30 days. Karen blinked, stunned into silence for the first time in her over-rehearsed life. But she didn't fold. A week later, I was served again. This time, they were dragging me to court. Claiming I'd cut off access out of spite. Said I caused emotional distress to the community. Their lawyer wore a smug grin and a $300 tie. He strutted into the hearing like he was about to lecture on civic duty. Tried to paint me as an angry loner with a grudge. "Mr. Franklin," he said, condescension dripping, "do you believe you're above the rules of this community?" "No," I replied. "But I do believe I'm above the sewage line." The courtroom chuckled. The judge raised an eyebrow. I handed over a packet, test results, drone footage, contract copies, a notarized report from Doug. The judge flipped through it slowly, then turned to their attorney with a question that landed like a gavel: "Why didn't you mention any of this?" The trial lasted 5 days. The HOA's case fell apart. Karen blamed the maintenance crew. The maintenance guy blamed Karen. The judge ruled in my favor, awarded damages for stress and property value loss, and issued an injunction preventing the HOA from ever accessing my well again, unless under a new agreement. One written on my terms. The bottled water truck stayed. The pool was drained. Karen's one-slick newsletters turned shrill, then vanished entirely. I didn't gloat. Didn't have to. I just installed a new sign beside the wellhead. Private supply. Trespassers will be billed. And beneath it, in small print: hydration is a privilege, not a right. I countersued the following Monday. After breakfast. The eggs were still warm when Luann hand-delivered the countersuit, 47 pages, neatly bound, to their lawyer's office. She thought it would be poetic. It named not just the HOA but Karen, personally. 3 board members, too. And their maintenance supervisor, who I'm pretty sure still thinks a water main is a type of fish. The charges? Environmental negligence. Willful contamination of a shared water source. Retaliatory enforcement of HOA bylaws. Violation of easement contracts. And for flavor, a little defamation of character. We threw the book at them, and added some custom chapters. I knew Karen would fight dirty. She doesn't retreat, she hosts brunch. Weaponizes mimosas and passive-aggressive sign-in sheets. But while she was holding emergency board meetings in someone's sunroom, I was stockpiling evidence. Certified lab results. Drone footage of sludge blooming behind the HOA's maintenance shed. Sworn affidavits from 2 former contractors who'd both quit over unethical waste management. One left a note scrawled on the back of a supply invoice. "This crap's not gonna stay buried forever." He wasn't kidding. Within 48 hours of filing in county court, we had a hearing date. Karen's lawyer tried to delay for mediation, but the judge shut it down fast, especially after reading the waterboard complaint I had quietly slipped into evidence. Turns out I wasn't the only one clocking brown sludge in the lake. Once the suit became public record, the neighborhood lit up. The same neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me started showing up with muffins and apologies. One dropped off a binder of board minutes from her time as secretary, 2014 through 2018, forgotten in a garage cabinet. Inside were notes from several meetings where Karen and her inner circle brainstormed cost-saving alternatives to city waste disposal. Their solution? Divert stormwater runoff to low-flow retention zones. Translation: pipe sewage into my lake. But the real bombshell came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Barry Coulson. Bald, red-faced, retired county infrastructure guy with a bum knee and a memory like a ledger. I'd helped Barry back when a developer tried to steal 10 feet of his land. Gave him a zoning map he didn't even know existed. I never asked for anything in return. Apparently, he remembered. "You still fighting that HOA?" he asked over the phone. "Harder than ever. You got a minute to talk drainage?" He showed up the next morning with a manila envelope and a USB drive. Inside, classified reports, including a 2019 memo about unauthorized diversion lines installed along maintenance parcel 3B, which, coincidentally, connected directly to the hose behind their shed. They hadn't just dumped waste. They'd engineered a bypass system to sneak it past city inspections. Labeled it irrigation upgrades. Barry even had satellite images of the installation crews working in secret, marked as landscaping projects. Wednesday morning. Trial day. The courtroom was packed like someone was raffling off real estate. Karen sat front row, dressed like she was auditioning for a funeral, flanked by lawyers who charged by the heartbeat. Her face was pulled so tight it could have snapped. I sat at our table, Luann beside me, sipping from a mug that read, "My lawyer can beat up your lawyer." Day one was all noise. Karen's side argued routine maintenance complications, said I was destabilizing the community. Their expert, a hydrologist who hadn't seen a well since freshman year, tried to claim the lake bloom could be natural. Nutrient inflow, he called it. Luann let him talk. Then handed him a drone photo showing a brown stream gushing from a pipe labeled HOA maintenance only. The expert blinked. Then stared at his shoes. Requesting a recess, he mumbled. By day 3, the court was being live-tweeted. Reporters lined the back wall. HOA lawyers tried to bury us in objections. Luann cut through them like she was born in a courtroom. When Karen took the stand, she turned on the waterworks, described me as a bitter land baron with a grudge. Said I withheld water as revenge. "Were you aware," Luann asked, "that the well your community relies on was never transferred to HOA ownership?" Karen hesitated. "I believed it was public infrastructure." "Belief," Luann replied, "is not a deed." Karen stammered. Said she had her lawyer look into it. "Do you have that in writing?" "No." Silence. Then Barry took the stand. No suit, just his usual county work jacket and a fire in his gut. "They installed the lines illegally," he said. "Didn't tell the city. Didn't file paperwork. They built a system to hide sewage and hoped nobody'd dig too deep." He looked at the jury. "Well, someone did." Karen's lawyer tried to object. The judge overruled so fast it left a scorch mark on the bench. The verdict came Friday. Guilty. The HOA was found in violation of environmental safety codes, in breach of the well agreement, and guilty of defamation in official communications. Karen was fined personally for gross misconduct. The board ordered to pay over $300,000 in damages and legal fees. And all HOA operations suspended until a new election could be held. You'd think that would be the end. That Karen would slink off in silence. Nope. 2 days later, a local news team showed up outside the community center to interview residents about the water crisis. Karen hijacked the mic, live. No script, no filter, just pure Karen. She blamed the court. Blamed the soil. Then, in a moment of breathtaking honesty, she admitted they'd temporarily rerouted overflow to cut costs. The reporter blinked. "Are you saying the HOA intentionally diverted sewage?" Karen blinked back. Realized what she'd said. Tried to spin. Not sewage. Just gray water. Reclaimed. Untreated. Natural runoff. Combined with operational backflow. So, the reporter said, raw sewage. Karen paused. That term is subjective. It aired live. Twice. Then it went viral. Headline: Karen admits HOA dumped poo water to save money. Thumbnail: her mouth half open, eyes like a raccoon in headlights. The comments were biblical. Within a week, Karen resigned. The entire board followed. The HOA's accounts were frozen pending audit. Community meetings turned into open rebellion. And me? I stayed quiet. Sat on my porch with a glass of bourbon and the kind of silence that tastes like justice. No more trucks. No more notices. No more HOA. Just peace. And a well that still runs clean. Just the sound of the lake starting to recover, and my phone buzzing with messages from neighbors who'd once rolled their eyes now asking if I'd consider running for HOA president. I didn't reply. I had bigger plans. The kind Karen would have really hated. But first, one last thing. I carved a new sign. Nailed it to the rotting wood of the old maintenance shed. Thick, red letters. Do not dump. We're watching. And underneath, smaller. P.S. We own the water. It all came down in a single afternoon, the kind where the air hangs heavy and humid, the kind of stillness you only get before something big breaks. The courtroom was packed tighter than a feed store on delivery day. Every folding chair filled. Every resident holding their breath. They'd all been watching this unfold for weeks. Like a slow-motion train wreck. Now it was Karen on the tracks, and the train was justice. The judge's voice was calm, but his words landed like thunder. The HOA was found liable for environmental violations, breach of contract, defamation, and gross negligence. They were ordered to pay $3,670 in direct damages and over $80,000 in legal fees. A full audit would be conducted by a state investigator. But the part that really hit? The court's ruling that the well, in perpetuity, belongs solely to me. Exclusive control. Access, maintenance, distribution. They couldn't flush a toilet, run a faucet, or fill a kiddie pool without my signed permission. You could have heard a pin drop when the gavel fell. I didn't smile. Not yet. Just leaned back and let the weight of it all settle in. Karen was there, tucked into the corner beside her third legal team. Eyes wide. Manicured hands clenched so tight I thought her acrylics might shatter. She didn't speak, not when the judge revoked her authority, not when the clerk read out the county's pending environmental charges, and definitely not when a uniformed officer handed her a subpoena on live TV. Fraud. Illegal dumping. Falsified maintenance records. It read like the credits to a very bad movie. The same woman who fined me for hedge asymmetry was now facing a criminal trial for dumping human waste into a public watershed. Irony's got teeth. The media exploded, local, regional, even one national outlet. My favorite headline? From a satire blog. HOA president dumped sewage. Got dumped. Another read. Karen fined $300,000 for fining guy who owned the water. It made the 6 o'clock news. The anchor read the verdict while sipping bottled water and trying not to laugh. Within a week, Karen's house had a "for sale" sign in the yard and a state seal sticker on the door. Under investigation. Do not enter. Nobody waved goodbye. No muffins. Just a hazmat team, a U-Haul, and what I assume was her last remaining cousin, peeling rubber out of Willow Ridge like the road was on fire. The rest of the board scattered like roaches. Some claimed ignorance. One guy, Jim, I think, said he joined for the free donuts. Didn't matter. Their names were on the documents. And documents don't care about donuts. A special election was called. For the first time in 10 years, every board seat was open. I didn't run. Didn't have to. People who used to glare at me in the street now nodded. Some dropped off pie. One neighbor, who once yelled at me for splashing his tulips, hand-delivered an apology letter and a six-pack. Funny how fast power shifts when truth bubbles up through the soil. At the first meeting under the new board, the air was different. No lectures about bunting colors or mailbox conformity. Just people, tired people, trying to rebuild. Trying to figure out how to live without the constant threat of a fine. They asked me to say a few words. I kept it short. When you find the guy who controls the faucet, you better pray he's feeling generous. Standing ovation. I added only one rule to the new water agreement. Not a fee. Not a usage cap. Just a single clause. Any attempt to subvert or override the rights of the well owner shall result in immediate suspension of services. They called it the Karen Clause. Voted in unanimously. I never charged anyone for water. Never planned to. I just wanted them to know whose pipe they were drinking from. As a final touch, I installed a new plaque by the lake, big, bronze, bolted to a pedestal I carved myself. Took me 2 days and left my back screaming. Totally worth it. This is what happens when you find the guy who controls your faucet. And below that. In memory of clear water, common sense, and the last HOA president of Willow Ridge. The lake cleared by fall. The fish came back. The algae bloom receded. I had Doug test the water one last time. He sent the results with a post-it. Cleaner than bottled. You should sell this stuff. I laughed. Nah. Let it be free. Just not forgotten. That winter, I poured a fresh slab down by the old maintenance shed. Capped the illegal pipe for good. Bolted on a thick iron sign. No dumping. Ever. And beneath that. We drink this. Remember. By spring, tourists started taking photos. A few students from the local college asked to do a case study on grassroots environmental justice. I told them it wasn't grassroots. It was just old-fashioned revenge, with a twist of legal paperwork and a heavy pour of patience. Life settled. Gossip faded. The grass grew back where Karen used to walk her dog just far enough into my yard to make a point. She's probably doing the same thing now in some poor Arizona subdivision, convincing someone their flower boxes violate community aesthetic. But here in Willow Ridge, we remember. 1 year to the day after the verdict, I threw a lakefront barbecue. Free drinks. Live music. Kids, dogs, paddleboards. We grilled burgers, toasted clean water, and christened the rebuilt dock with a bottle of sparkling cider and a new plaque. The water's fine. I sat at the edge of the dock as the sun dipped gold over the water, now clear from bank to bank. Boots off. Dog at my side. Mug of coffee warm in my hand. No meetings. No violations. No noise. Just the wind through cattails, and the soft lapping of peace. That's when I saw it, my favorite sign. Still standing on the hill above the pump house. Bolt heads glinting in the evening light. Private supply. Trespassers will be billed. The faucet was still mine. And so was the quiet.